The stack of $100 bills in the garbage bag burned Miguel's calloused hands as he stood frozen between desperate poverty and devastating honesty. The CEO's reaction to what he did next would transform his life forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Miguel Reyes tightened his grip on the industrial-strength garbage bag as he made his way across the polished marble floors of Meridian Financial's executive floor. The weight of the bag was unusual, heavier than the typical office waste of coffee cups and crumpled papers. As a night shift janitor, Miguel had developed an intuition for the contents of trash, and something about this particular bag from the CFO's office felt wrong. The 54-year-old single father had been working at Meridian for nearly 7 years now, ever since his wife Elena had passed away from cancer, leaving him to raise their daughter Sophia alone. The janitorial position wasn't what he'd envisioned for himself. Not after 15 years as a mechanical engineer in his native Colombia, but his credentials hadn't transferred to the United States, and Sophia needed stability more than he needed pride. Buenas noches, Mr. Reyes, called the night security guard from his station. Working late again? Miguel nodded with a tired smile. Just finishing up the executive floor, Thomas. Then I can go home to Sophia. He shifted the garbage bag to his other hand, the unusual weight causing his arm to strain. How's she doing with those college applications? Thomas asked, looking up from his crossword puzzle. Brilliant as always, Miguel said, his face brightening despite the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. MIT, Stanford, Columbia, she's applying to them all. My Sophia, she will be the engineer. I couldn't be here. The guard gave him a thumbs up before returning to his puzzle. Miguel continued toward the service elevator, but something made him pause. The weight distribution in the bag had shifted, and now he could feel distinct rectangular objects pressing against the plastic. Curiosity got the better of him. Ducking into the janitor's closet, Miguel carefully opened the bag and gasped. Staring up at him were neatly bundled stacks of $100 bills, more money than he had ever seen in his life. His hands trembled as he quickly closed the bag, heart hammering against his ribs. This wasn't trash. This was at least $1 million, possibly more. Miguel's mind raced. With this money, Sophia could attend any university without worrying about student loans. They could move out of their tiny one-bedroom apartment where she'd been sleeping on a pull-out couch since she was 12. He could finally get the knee replacement surgery he'd been postponing. They could have the life Elena had dreamed for them. But as quickly as these thoughts came, Miguel pushed them away. This money wasn't. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Cash like this didn't end up in the trash by accident. Either it was dirty money being disposed of, or someone had made a terrible mistake. Miguel thought of his daughter, her unwavering moral compass, her belief in doing what was right no matter the cost. What would Sophia think if he brought home unexplained cash? What lesson would that teach her after years of telling her that integrity mattered more than money? With shaking hands, Miguel pulled out his phone and called the only number he could think of, Victoria Mercer, the CEO of Meridian Financial. He'd only spoken to her a handful of times in passing, but she had always acknowledged him by name, a small courtesy that many executives didn't bother with. Her direct line was posted in the janitorial office for emergencies only. To his surprise, she answered on the third ring. Miss Mercer, this is Miguel Reyes, the night janitor. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but I've found something in the trash that I think you need to see immediately. Mr. Reyes? Her voice was alert despite the late hour. What is it? It's money. A lot of money. From M.R. Davidson's office, trash. Single quotes. There was a long pause. Stay right where you are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Miguel waited in the janitor's closet, the bag of money next to him feeling like a live bomb. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Don't forget to take your pain meds, Papa. Love you. His knee throbbed as if on cue, a constant reminder of the surgery he couldn't afford, of the better life that was currently sitting in a garbage bag beside him. 23 minutes later, the elevator dinged and Victoria Mercer strode into the hallway, still dressed in the tailored suit she'd worn for a charity gala earlier that evening. At 42, she was younger than most CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, but her reputation for brilliance and ruthless efficiency had quickly propelled her to the top. Mr. Reyes, she said, her voice controlled. Show me what you found. Miguel led her into the janitor's closet and carefully opened the garbage bag. Victoria's normally composed face showed a flash of shock before settling into a grim expression. When did you find this? She asked sharply. About 30 minutes ago. It was in Davidson's personal trash can, not the regular recycling or office waste. Victoria's jaw tightened. And you called me immediately? Miguel nodded. Yes, Ms. Mercer, I didn't count it, but single quotes, but it's clearly a significant amount. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Security, this is Mercer. Lock down the building. No one enters or leaves. And pull up all the security footage from the CFO's office for the past 48 hours. I'm calling the police. Miguel's stomach dropped. The police. Of course they would be involved with something this serious. What if they suspected him? An immigrant finding a bag of cash, it wouldn't be the first time someone in his position was wrongfully accused. Miss Mercer, he said, his voice strained. My daughter, Sophia, she's alone at home. I need to. Victoria held up a hand as she finished giving instructions over the phone. When she hung up, her expression softened slightly. Mr. Reyes, I need you to stay as a witness, but I promise this won't take all night. Can your daughter manage a few more hours? Miguel nodded reluctantly. Sophia was 17, perfectly capable of being alone, but she would worry if he didn't come home. He sent her a quick text explaining that he had to work late. Within the hour, the executive floor of Meridian Financial had transformed into a crime scene. Police officers photographed the money while detectives questioned Miguel repeatedly about how he'd found it. The CFO, James Davidson, had been called in and was currently being interviewed in a conference room, his face ashen. As dawn broke, Miguel sat exhausted on a bench outside the executive offices, his knees screaming in pain. Victoria Mercer approached him with 2 cups of coffee. Black with 1 sugar, right? She said, offering him a cup. Miguel blinked in surprise. Yes. Thank you. She sat beside him, smoothing her skirt. The police are finishing up. The money appears to be connected to an embezzlement scheme Davidson was running. When our internal audit started getting close, he panicked and tried to dispose of the evidence. Miguel nodded, too tired to fully process the information. You could have taken that money, Victoria said quietly. No one would have known. Our security cameras don't cover the inside of trash cans. There was no accusation in her voice. Only a statement of fact. It wasn't mine to take, Miguel replied simply. Victoria studied him for a moment. How long have you worked for Meridian, Mr. Reyes? Almost 7 years now, and before that? Miguel hesitated. In Colombia, I was a mechanical engineer. I specialized in hydraulic systems for manufacturing plant, and now you clean toilets for minimum wage plus benefits, Victoria stated, her eyes never leaving his face. Miguel straightened his shoulders. It is honest work that puts food on our table. My daughter, Sophia, Victoria interjected. The one applying to engineering school. Miguel couldn't hide his surprise. How did you? I make it my business to know my employees, Mr. Reyes, especially the ones who find $1 million in the trash and immediately call the CEO instead of walking out the door. She took a sip of her coffee. What if I told you there's a reward for information leading to the recovery of stolen funds? Standard policy 10%. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. 10%? Victoria nodded. That's $100,000, Mr. Reyes, before taxes, of course. The room seemed to spin. $100,000 would change everything. Sophia's education, their housing situation, his knee. It wasn't dirty money. It was a legitimate reward. Why? He whispered. Why what? Victoria asked. Why would you give me so much? The company policy can't possibly. The policy exists precisely for situations like this, Victoria interrupted. But if you're asking why I personally approve of it in your case, it's because integrity like yours is rare, Mr. Reyes, and at Meridian, we value rare assets. As Miguel tried to process what was happening, Victoria stood up. The detectives need one more statement from you, and then you're free to go. The reward paperwork will be processed by HR tomorrow. She extended her hand. Thank you for your service to Meridian, Mr. Reyes. Not just last night, but every night for the past 7 years. Miguel stood shakily and shook her hand. As Victoria walked away, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The weight of possibility. One bag of trash had just changed the trajectory of his family's future, not because he'd found money, but because he'd chosen to do the right thing when no one was watching. Outside the window, the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the city skyline. It was going to be a new day in more ways than one. Miguel stood outside their apartment door, key in hand, frozen in disbelief. The events of the past 12 hours felt like a fever dream. In his pocket was a formal letter from Meridian Financial's legal department, confirming the reward, $100,000, to be processed within 5 business days. His fingers traced the embossed company letterhead, the tangible proof that he hadn't imagined everything. He unlocked the door quietly, knowing Sophia would be preparing for school. Their 1-bedroom apartment was immaculate, as always his daughter's doing. Despite working 30 hours a week at a local coffee shop on top of maintaining her perfect GPA, Sophia somehow found time to keep their humble home in order. Papa Sophia emerged from the bathroom, her school uniform already on, hair still damp from the shower. Her face, so much like Elena's, immediately registered concern. You look exhausted. What happened last night? Your text was so vague. Miguel set his lunch bag down and embraced his daughter, Cyan Tate. Mi vida, I have something important to tell you. Sophia's expression grew serious as they sat at their small kitchen table. Miguel recounted everything, finding the money, calling Victoria Mercer, the police investigation, and finally the reward. As he spoke, Sophia's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth in shock. Dios mío, Papa, she whispered when he finished. $100,000? Are you serious? Miguel nodded, pulling out the letter. Very serious. Sophia scanned the document, her hands trembling slightly. Then she looked up at her father, eyes shining with tears and pride. You could have taken it. No one would have known. The same words Victoria Mercer had spoken. Miguel shook his head firmly. That was never an option, Sophia. Never. What would your mother say if I taught her daughter that stealing was acceptable? What kind of example would that set? Sophia launched herself into her father's arms, nearly knocking him off his chair. I'm so proud of you, Papa. Mama would be too. They sat together, planning how to use the money. MIT tuition was at the top of the list, followed by a small 2-bedroom apartment closer to Sophia's school. Miguel cautiously suggested his knee surgery, which Sophia immediately elevated to priority status. The applications are due next week, Sophia said, pulling out her laptop. With this reward, we can actually afford the application fees for all the schools now. Miguel watched his daughter, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. In that moment, he knew he had made the right decision. Not just for moral reasons, but because the example he'd set was worth more than any amount of money he could have stolen. I need to sleep for a few hours before my shift tonight, Miguel said, standing with a wince as his knee protested. Sophia closed her laptop. Actually, Papa, I called your supervisor while you were in the shower. I told him you had a medical emergency and needed a day off. Before Miguel could protest, she continued. He said it was fine. You haven't taken a sick day in 3 years. Too exhausted to argue. Miguel nodded gratefully and headed to the pull-out couch that served as his bed. As he drifted off to sleep, the weight of constant worry that had been his companion for 7 years felt just a little lighter. When Miguel woke hours later, the apartment was quiet. Sophia had left a note explaining she'd gone to work and would be home by 9. He made himself a cup of coffee and turned on the local news, nearly dropping his mug when he saw Victoria Mercer on the screen, standing outside Meridian Financial's headquarters. Committed to transparency during this investigation, she was saying to a crowd of reporters, I can confirm that James Davidson, our former CFO, has been terminated and is cooperating with authorities regarding the misappropriation of company funds. The camera cut to the news anchor. Sources tell us that the embezzlement scheme was discovered when a janitor at Meridian Financial found nearly $1 million in cash that Davidson was attempting to dispose of. The janitor, whose name has not been released, reportedly turned the money in immediately. Miguel sank into his chair. He hadn't expected the story to make the news. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Reyes, this is Victoria Mercer. Could you please call me at your convenience? There have been some developments you should be aware of. With shaking hands, Miguel dialed the number. Reyes. Victoria answered immediately. Thank you for calling back so quickly. Is something wrong with the reward? Miguel asked, his stomach clenching with anxiety. Not at all, Victoria assured him. The paperwork is being processed as we speak. I'm calling because the press has gotten wind of the story, though we haven't released your name. I wanted to warn you that reporters might start digging. Miguel glanced at the television, where they were now showing security footage of the Meridian building. What should I do? You're under no obligation to speak to anyone, Victoria said firmly. In fact, I would advise against it until the investigation is complete. Davidson's legal team will look for any way to discredit witnesses. I understand, Miguel said, though the idea of being targeted by expensive lawyers made him uneasy. There's something else, Victoria continued. The board was extremely impressed by your integrity, Mr. Reyes. They've asked me to extend an invitation for you to attend our quarterly shareholders meeting next week. They'd like to formally recognize your actions. Miguel was speechless. Shareholders meetings were for executives and major investors, not janitors. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Victoria replied, a smile evident in her voice, and wear a suit. The company will provide one if needed. After hanging up, Miguel sat in stunned silence. Recognition from the board? A suit? This was all moving too fast. He was just a janitor who'd done the right thing, the only thing he could have done. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Thomas, the night security guard. Miguel, man, you're famous. Everyone's talking about the janitor who found the cash. I didn't say anything, but people are speculating like crazy. By the time Sophia returned home that evening, 3 more people from Meridian had contacted Miguel, including his direct supervisor, who assured him his job was secure and offered him the rest of the week off with pay. It's getting crazy, Sophia, Miguel explained as they ate a simple dinner. Mrs. Mercer says reporters might start looking for me. Sophia considered this. Maybe we should get ahead of it. If we control the narrative, we can prevent misunderstandings. What do you mean? I mean, agree to one interview with a reporter we choose and tell your story your way, before rumors start. Miguel nodded slowly. His daughter was wise beyond her years. Perhaps Mercer could recommend someone trustworthy. The next morning, Miguel returned to Meridian, not to work, but to meet with Victoria in her office. The security guards nodded respectfully as he passed, no longer just another invisible service worker. Victoria greeted him warmly, gesturing for him to sit in one of the plush chairs opposite her desk. How are you holding up? She asked, studying him carefully. It's overwhelming, Miguel admitted. Everyone suddenly knows who I am, yet they don't really know me at all, Victoria nodded. Fame, even temporary fame, is disorienting, which is why I asked you here today. She slid a folder across the desk. These are 3 journalists I trust. If you want to share your story, any one of them would handle it with integrity. Miguel opened the folder, scanning the names and publications. My daughter suggested something similar. Smart girl, Victoria remarked. The one on top, Eliza Chun, is particularly good. She specializes in human interest stories and won't sensationalize your experience. As Miguel considered the options, Victoria leaned forward. There's something else I wanted to discuss, Mr. Reyes. Something more long term. Miguel looked up, curious. I've been reviewing your background. 15 years as a mechanical engineer specializing in hydraulic systems. A master's degree from Universidad Nacional de Colombia. Patents in your name for 3 different hydraulic valve designs, Miguel stiffened. How did you? As I said yesterday, I make it my business to know my employee, Victoria replied, especially ones with your integrity and qualifications. Those qualifications aren't recognized here, Miguel said, the old bitterness rising despite himself. By most companies, perhaps, Victoria conceded, but Meridian recently acquired Jensen Manufacturing, a company that specializes in custom hydraulic systems for the financial security sector, specifically vault system. Miguel's heart skipped a beat as he began to understand where this conversation was heading. Are you offering me a job? Victoria smiled. Jensen has been struggling with inefficiencies in their hydraulic deployment systems. Their current engineering team is stuck. I believe someone with your expertise could provide a fresh perspective. She handed him another folder. This is a consulting contract, 3 months, with the possibility of a permanent position afterward. The salary is commensurate with your experience and education, significantly more than your current position. Miguel opened the folder with trembling hands, his eyes widening at the figure on the contract. It was more than 5 times his current salary. Why? He asked, echoing his question from the previous day. Why would you do this for me? Victoria's expression softened slightly. Mr. Reyes, do you know how rare it is to find someone with both technical brilliance and unimpeachable integrity? In the financial sector, we entrust companies like Jensen with the physical security of billions of dollars in assets. I need people I can trust, absolutely. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. What happened with Davidson wasn't just a financial crime. It was a failure of character that could have been catastrophic for Meridian. You, on the other hand, passed a character test that most would fail. Land, you did it without hesitation. Miguel looked down at the contract, then back at Victoria. I would need time to consider this. Of course, Victoria nodded. Take the weekend. Discuss it with Sophia. The position wouldn't start for 3 weeks, giving you time to give notice and transition your current responsibilities. As Miguel left Victoria's office, contract in hand, he felt as if he were walking through a dream. In the elevator, he caught his reflection in the polished metal doors. He still wore his blue janitor's uniform, but the man staring back at him stood a little straighter, his eyes clearer, his future suddenly, unexpectedly, full of possibility. 1 bag of trash. That's all it had taken to potentially restore everything he'd lost when they'd immigrated. His career, his dignity, his ability to provide for Sophia beyond mere survival, all because he'd done the simple, obvious thing. He'd returned what wasn't his. The weekend passed in a blur of careful consideration and long conversation. Miguel and Sophia sat at their kitchen table surrounded by printouts, the consulting contract, information about Jensen Manufacturing, and a notepad filled with Sophia's meticulous pros and cons lists. They'd been analyzing the opportunity for hours. Papa, this is your chance to be an engineer again, Sophia said, tapping the salary figure on the contract. This is more than fair compensation for someone with your experience. It's what you deserve. Miguel ran his hand over his face, the stubble of a weekend without shaving rough against his palm. It feels too good to be true, Mija. One day I'm mopping floors, the next day a CEO is offering me an engineering position. People work years for opportunities like this. Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. You did work years. 15 years in Colombia, and 7 years proving your character here. Mrs. Mercer isn't giving you charity, she's making a smart business decision. Miguel smiled at his daughter's confidence. When did you become so wise, eh? I learned from the best. Sophia squeezed his hand. What would Mama say? Miguel closed his eyes, picturing Elena. Her practical nature, her unwavering support of his career, her fierce belief in their family's potential. She would tell me to stop being stubborn and sign the contract, he admitted with a soft chuckle. Sophia grinned. Then it's decided. Single quotes. Monday morning found Miguel standing outside Victoria Mercer's office once again, this time in a modest suit they'd purchased over the weekend with part of an advance on the reward money. The receptionist, who had never acknowledged his existence during his years of emptying her trash can, now smiled warmly and offered him coffee. When Victoria welcomed him into her office, Miguel placed the signed contract on her desk with steady hands. I accept your offer, Ms. Mercer, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. Victoria's professional smile broadened into something more genuine as she shook his hand. Excellent, and please call me Victoria. We'll be working closely together on the Jensen integration. She pressed a button on her desk phone. Amanda, please bring in the Jensen files and ask HR to join us. Turning back to Miguel, she added, I hope you don't mind jumping in right away. The shareholders' meeting is Thursday, and I'd like you to have a preliminary assessment of Jensen's hydraulic systems by then. Miguel straightened his shoulders. I'm ready. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of technical documents, meetings with Jensen engineers via video conference, and a crash course in Meridian's corporate culture. Miguel absorbed everything with the hunger of a man reclaiming his professional identity. On Wednesday evening, he visited the Jensen facility in person, running his hands over the hydraulic components of their flagship vault system with the reverence of a musician reunited with a beloved instrument. The problem is in the pressure differential between these 2 chambers, he explained to the Jensen team lead, who watched with poorly disguised skepticism. When the system heats up after extended operation, the seals expand at different rates, creating microfractures here and here. He pointed to joints that showed almost imperceptible signs of stress. The team lead crossed his arm. We've had 3 different consultants look at this system. None of them spotted that. They weren't looking in the right place, Miguel said simply. My team in Colombia faced a similar issue with industrial hydraulic presses. The solution is relatively straightforward, a redesigned valve assembly with temperature compensating materials. He sketched the modification on a whiteboard, his hand moving with the confidence of someone who had never left the field. By the time he finished his explanation, the skepticism had vanished from the team lead's face, replaced by reluctant respect. I'll need to run simulations, but ... This could work, the engineer admitted. Miguel returned to his apartment that night. Sophia was waiting up for him, surrounded by her MIT application materials. How was it? She asked eagerly. Miguel set down his briefcase, a gift from Victoria, and loosened his tie. It felt like coming home, he said simply, like waking up from a long dream. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I'm so happy for you, Papa. How is the application coming? Sophia gestured at the papers spread across the table. Almost finished. Just polishing my personal statement. She hesitated. I've been thinking... Maybe I should mention what happened. With you finding the money? Miguel considered this. It's your statement, Mia. But remember, this is about your future, not my moment in the spotlight. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. You're right. I want to get in on my own merits. She looked up at him, eyes bright. But someday I'm going to tell this story, how my father's integrity changed everything for us. Thursday morning arrived, and with it, the shareholders' meeting. Miguel stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting his new tie, a deep blue silk that Sophia had insisted brought out his eyes. His reflection showed a man transformed, not just by the suit or the professional haircut, but by the restoration of dignity. The Meridian Financial Shareholders Meeting was held in a grand ballroom at the city's most prestigious hotel. Miguel entered tentatively, overwhelmed by the opulence in the crowd of powerful people and expensive attire. He was relieved to spot Thomas, the night security guard, similarly dressed up and looking equally uncomfortable. Miguel! Thomas greeted him with a firm handshake. Man, can you believe we're here? Victoria invited all the night staff who worked during, the incident. Before Miguel could respond, a hush fell over the room as Victoria Mercer took the stage. She looked formidable in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin our quarterly financial review, I want to address the situation that has likely brought many of you here today. Her voice was strong and clear, requiring no microphone despite the size of the room. As you know, Meridian recently uncovered an embezzlement scheme orchestrated by our former CFO, James Davidson. She paused, letting the murmurs ripple through the crowd. What you may not know is that this discovery was not the result of our security systems, our accounting protocols, or our executive oversight. It was the result of one individual's unwavering integrity. Victoria extended her hand toward Miguel. Mr. Miguel Reyes, would you please join me? All eyes turned to Miguel, who felt a moment of panic before steadying himself. He walked toward the stage, conscious of every step, every gaze following him. As he climbed the steps, Victoria shook his hand warmly, a gesture of equals. Reyes has been with Meridian for 7 years as a member of our janitorial staff. Last week, while performing his duties, he discovered nearly $1 million in cash that Maria Davidson had attempted to dispose of. Despite personal financial hardships, Reyes immediately reported his discovery, ultimately preventing the loss of millions more through Davidson's scheme. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Miguel stood straight, his face warm but his expression dignified. This is more than a story about recovered funds, Victoria continued when the applause subsided. It is a testament to the character of every individual in our organization, from the executive suite to the cleaning crew. It reminds us that integrity is not measured by salary or title, but by the choices we make when no one is watching. She turned to Miguel. Would you like to say a few words? Miguel hesitated, then stepped forward to the microphone. The room fell silent. Thank you, Miss Mercer. I am ... honored to be here. His accent was pronounced, but his English clear. I did only what I believe anyone should do, what I would want my daughter to do. The money was not mine, so I could not keep it. He paused, gathering courage. For 7 years I have cleaned these offices at night while most of you were home with your families. Many faces here I recognize, but few would recognize me. I was invisible. A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. But Miss Mercer saw me not just after finding the money, but before. She knew my name. She greeted me when working late. Small things that cost nothing but mean everything to those of us who often feel unseen. Victoria's composed expression flickered with genuine emotion. In Colombia, I was an engineer. Here I became a janitor to provide for my daughter. Both jobs are honorable when done with pride and integrity. But today, thanks to Mercer's belief in second chances, I am an engineer again. He looked out at the crowd, meeting their eyes with newfound confidence. The true measure of a company is not how it treats its most valuable employees, but how it treats its most vulnerable. By that measure, Meridian has proven itself exceptional, not because of how it rewarded me after, but because of how Miss Mercer treated me before, when I was just the man who emptied her trash. The silence that followed was profound, broken only when Victoria stepped forward, visibly moved, and led the room in a standing ovation. Shareholders, board members, and executives all rose to their feet, their applause thunderous. As Miguel returned to his seat, people reached out to shake his hand, pat his shoulder, Offer words of congratulations. Thomas gave him a thumbs up from across the room, grinning broadly. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of financial reports and strategic plans. When it concluded, a line of people formed to speak with Miguel, board members curious about his engineering background, executives eager to associate themselves with the story of integrity that was already spreading through the business community, and several journalists hoping for exclusive interviews. Through it all, Miguel maintained his quiet dignity. He answered questions politely but briefly, deflecting excessive praise and redirecting conversations about the money toward discussions of engineering challenges at Jensen Manufacturing. As the crowd finally thinned, Victoria approached him once more. "You made quite an impression, Miguel. The board is ecstatic, both about recovering the money and about the positive press. Your story has already increased our stock price by 2 points this morning." Miguel smiled wryly. "Glad my honesty has shareholder value." Victoria laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in corporate setting. "In this world, everything eventually gets a price tag." Her expression turned more serious. "But some things remain priceless. Thank you for reminding us of that today." As Miguel left the hotel, his phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "MIT application submitted. How was the meeting?" Miguel paused on the sidewalk, the spring sunshine warm on his face. 1 week ago, he had been a janitor with a painful knee and constant financial worries. Today, he was an engineer again, with resources to provide for his daughter and the respect of people who had previously looked through him. All because he had done the simplest, most obvious thing. He had chosen integrity when no one was watching. The media frenzy began the morning after the shareholders' meeting. Miguel woke to find his phone buzzing incessantly with notifications, text messages from former co-workers, emails from reporters, and several voicemails from Spanish-language television programs. Eliza Chun, the journalist Victoria had recommended, had published a thoughtful piece in the Financial Times titled "The Janitor's Integrity: How Meridian's Lowest-Paid Employees Saved Millions." The story had gone viral overnight. "Papa, you're trending on Twitter," Sophia exclaimed over breakfast, scrolling through her phone with wide eyes. People are using hashtags like #BeMoreLikeMiguel and #IntegrityMatters. Miguel set down his coffee cup with a grimace. "This is too much attention, Misha. I did what anyone would do." Sophia looked up from her phone. "But that's the point, Papa. Not everyone would do what you did. That's why people are so inspired." His first day at Jensen Manufacturing was overshadowed by his newfound celebrity. Colleagues he had just met asked for selfies. Security guards wanted to shake his hand, and the receptionist told him her mother had cried reading his story. "I'm an engineer, not a hero," he told the Jensen team lead during lunch. "I'd prefer to focus on solving the hydraulic valve problem." The engineer nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Reyes, but you must understand, in a world where scandals and corruption dominate the headline, people are hungry for stories like yours." By the end of the week, interview requests had poured in from major news outlets. Victoria assigned a Meridian PR representative to help Miguel manage the attention, but he declined most requests, agreeing only to a single televised interview with Eliza Chun. "You don't enjoy the spotlight," Eliza observed during their pre-interview chat in the studio green room. Miguel smoothed his tie nervously. "In Colombia, attention could be dangerous. My family lived through difficult times, the cartels, the violence. We learned to keep our heads down, to be invisible." He looked up at her. "Old habits die hard." Eliza nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. My parents fled the Cultural Revolution in China with similar instinct." She made a note in her tablet. "We'll focus on the engineering angle. Then your expertise and Meridian's decision to recognize talent regardless of position." The interview was broadcast nationally that weekend. Miguel watched it with Sophia from their living room, cringing slightly at seeing himself on screen, but pleased with how Eliza had focused on his qualification and the importance of recognizing skills regardless of current position. "You were great, Papa," Sophia assured him, squeezing his hand as the segment ended. Perfect balance of humble and confident. Miguel smiled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," he admitted. "Good fortune this sudden feels ... precarious." Sophia was about to respond when Miguel's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Reyes. This is Dr. Harriet Watkins from MIT's Admissions Committee." The woman's voice was warm but official. "I hope I'm not disturbing you on a Sunday evening." Miguel's heart skipped. "No, not at all, Dr. Watkins." "Wonderful. I'm calling regarding Sophia's application. We were very impressed with her academic achievements and personal state." There was a pause. "And I must admit, we've been following your story with great interest." Miguel frowned slightly. "My daughter's application should be judged on her own merits." Dr. Watkins. "Of course, Mr. Reyes. And her merits are exceptional. That's precisely why I'm calling. We'd like to invite Sophia for an early admission interview next week. We normally wouldn't conduct these until later in the cycle, but given her qualifications, the committee is eager to meet her." When Miguel hung up, Sophia was staring at him, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "MIT wants to interview you next week," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "Early admission interview." Sophia screamed and threw her arms around his neck. "Are you serious?" "That never happened." Miguel hugged her tightly, but couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that this sudden interest had more to do with his newfound fame than Sophia's abilities, despite Dr. Watkins' assurances. The following week brought new developments at Jensen Manufacturing. Miguel's redesign of the valve assembly had tested successfully in simulation, and the team was preparing to build a prototype. "The pressure compensation is elegant," the lead engineer acknowledged during their review meet, "especially the temperature gradient solution." Miguel nodded. accepting the compliment with quiet pride. The next challenge will be scaling this for the larger vault systems without increasing production costs. As they continued discussing technical details, Miguel's phone buzzed. It was Victoria Mercer's direct line. He excused himself to take the call. "Miguel, I need you to come to my office immediately," Victoria said, her voice unusually tense. "Is something wrong?" There was a brief pause. "It's better discussed in person. How soon can you be here?" 30 minutes later, Miguel sat in Victoria's office trying to interpret her grave expression. She wasn't alone. Meridian's head of security and a man Miguel didn't recognize were also present. "This is Agent Dawson with the FBI." Victoria introduced the stranger. "He has some questions about the night you found the money." Miguel's stomach clenched. "Of course. I've already given statements to the police. This is different." Agent Dawson interrupted. Expression neutral but intent. "M.R. Davidson's lawyers are suggesting an alternative narrative. They filed a motion claiming that you planted the money as part of a conspiracy to frame him." Miguel stared at the agent in disbelief. "That's absurd. I found the money in his trash, which conveniently had no camera coverage," Dawson pointed out. "Mr. Davidson claims he was being blackmailed by unnamed parties within Meridian and that you were their inside man." "That's ridiculous," Victoria interjected sharply. "Mr. Reyes has an impeccable record." "As a janitor, yes," Dawson agreed. But his sudden promotion to a high-paying engineering position immediately after the incident raises questions about potential quid pro quo arrangements. Miguel felt the blood drain from his face. "You think I was rewarded for framing Davidson?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Reyes. I'm investigating all possibilities." Dawson pulled out a small notebook. "Let's start with your finance. Have you made any unusual purchases since receiving the reward money?" The questioning lasted 2 hours. Every aspect of Miguel's life was scrutinized. His immigration status, his financial history, his relationship with other Meridian employees. By the time Agent Dawson finally left, Miguel felt hollowed out, his initial triumph now tainted by suspicion. Victoria closed the door behind the agent and turned to Miguel, her expression a mixture of anger and concern. "This is a desperate legal maneuver by Davidson's team," she assured him. "They're trying to create reasonable doubt by muddying the waters. Agent Dawson is just doing his job by following up." Miguel nodded numbly. "Of course." "Miguel," Victoria said firmly, waiting until he met her eyes, "I don't doubt your integrity for a second. Neither does anyone else at Meridian. We will provide whatever resources you need to fight this, legal counsel, character witnesses, anything." "Thank you," Miguel said quietly. "But the damage is already done, isn't it? The questions have been raised. Now, I'm not just the honest janitor, I'm potentially part of a conspiracy." Victoria's expression hardened. "Davidson won't win this, I promise you." When Miguel returned to his apartment that evening, he found Sophia bubbling with excitement over her upcoming MIT interview. He forced a smile, unwilling to burden her with the new development. "They're flying me out on Thursday," she explained, showing him the email confirmation. "The interview is Friday morning, and they've arranged for a campus tour afterward." "That's wonderful, Mija," Miguel said, embracing his daughter. "I'm so proud of you." Sophia pulled back, studying his face. "What's wrong, Papa? Did something happen at work?" Miguel hesitated, then decided Sophia deserved the truth. She would hear about it eventually. The accusations would likely make the news soon enough. As he explained about Davidson's claims in the FBI investigation, Sophia's expression shifted from shock to indignation, determination. "This is outrageous," she exclaimed when he finished. "Anyone who knows you would never believe this garbage." "Unfortunately, most people don't know me," Miguel pointed out. "They know a story and narrative that suited everyone at Meridian because it made the company look good. Now there's a counter-narrative and people will wonder." Sophia paced the small living room, her mind working furiously. "We need to get ahead of this like we did with the first story. Talk to Eliza Chun again, maybe?" Miguel shook his head. "The FBI has advised me not to speak publicly while they investigate." "Then what's your plan?" Miguel sat heavily on the couch. "I don't know, Sophia. This is why attention made me uncomfortable from the beginning. When you're in the spotlight, people look for cracks, for ways to tear you down." Sophia sat beside him, taking his hand. "Papa, listen to me. Davidson is desperate. He's facing serious prison time, and this is his only defense. The truth will come out." "I hope so," Miguel said quietly. "But in the meantime, this cloud hangs over everything. My job, your MIT interview, ... single quotes." Sophia straightened. "No. I refuse to let this affect my interview. And you shouldn't let it affect your work either. We've done nothing wrong." Miguel smiled sadly at his daughter's determination. "When did you become so strong, Mija?" "I learned from watching you face impossible situations with dignity," she replied softly. "For 7 years I watched you work a job far beneath your abilities without complaint. I watched you sacrifice everything." Her eyes glistened. "Now it's my turn to be strong for you." That night, as Sophia slept, Miguel sat at their kitchen table scrolling through news articles about Davidson's counter-allegations. They had indeed hit the press, with headlines ranging from neutral questions to outright sensationalism. "Heroic janitor or master conspirator? Meridian money mystery deepens." His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. They want you there. I'm fighting for you, Miguel." He set the phone down and buried his face in his hand. 1 week of recognition and prosperity, followed by this. Perhaps the universe was balancing accounts, reminding him that a man like him, an immigrant janitor, wasn't meant to rise so quickly. "No," he thought fiercely, pushing away the self-pity. "I earned this. I did nothing wrong." As the digital clock on the microwave ticked over to midnight, Miguel made a decision. He wouldn't run, hide, or shame, as he might have done before. He would face these accusations with the same integrity that had guided his decision to return the money. The truth was his only defense, and it would have to be enough. The Meridian Financial boardroom was silent as Miguel finished recounting, once again, the events of the night he found the money. 10 board members sat around the massive mahogany table, their expressions ranging from skepticism to sympathy. Victoria stood at the head of the table, her posture rigid with tension. "Thank you, Mr. Reyes," said Howard Geller, the board chairman, a silver-haired man with penetrating blue eyes. "We appreciate your candor." "I've told the same story from the beginning," Miguel said quietly. "Because it's the truth." Geller nodded, then turned to Victoria. "These allegations put Meridian in a precarious position. The optics are problematic." "The optics?" Victoria repeated, her voice sharp. "Davidson embezzled millions and nearly got away with it. The only reason we caught him is sitting right here. And you're worried about optics?" "The market is already reacting," said Diane Layton, the board's financial advisor, gesturing to a tablet showing Meridian's stock price down 3% since the news broke. "Uncertainty makes investors nervous." Miguel looked around the table, suddenly understanding the purpose of this meeting. "You want to distance yourselves from me," he stated flatly. A heavy silence confirmed his suspicion. "No one is saying that, Mr. Reyes," Geller began diplomatically. "They don't have to say it," Miguel interrupted, his quiet dignity filling the room. "I understand business. A liability must be cut loose." Victoria slammed her hand on the table. "Miguel is not a liability. He's an asset, not just for his engineering expertise, but for the integrity he's demonstrated." "Alleged integrity," Layton corrected. "If Davidson's claims have merit." "They don't," Victoria snapped. "But if they do," Layton persisted, "then Meridian will face severe reputational damage for promoting him, creating a media narrative around his honesty." Miguel stood slowly, drawing all eyes to him. "I will make this easy for you," he said. "I will take a leave of absence from Jensen Manufacturing until the investigation concludes." "Miguel, no," Victoria protested. He held up a hand. "It's the right thing to do. I don't want Meridian or Jensen to suffer because of these false allegations. When my name is cleared, I will return." The board members exchanged glances, clearly relieved by his suggestion. "That would be a reasonable approach," Geller agreed, nodding. "Paid leave, of course, and Meridian will provide full legal support." Victoria added firmly, her tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. As the meeting concluded, Miguel felt a curious detachment. He'd lost a job before when he'd first immigrated, when his Colombian credentials meant nothing in America. He'd survived then. He would survive now. Victoria caught up to him in the hallway, her face flushed with anger. "You shouldn't have offered to step aside. We could have fought this." Miguel gave her a sad smile. "You're still fighting, Victoria, but I choose the battles that preserve my dignity. This is not surrender. It's strategy. Davidson is trying to destroy you to save himself." "Yes," Miguel agreed simply, "and he will fail, because lies collapse under their own weight eventually." Victoria studied him, her expression softening. "How are you so calm?" Miguel considered the question. "I've faced worse than false accusations. When Elena was diagnosed, when we lost our home in Colombia, when we arrived here with nothing, those were true crises. This is just noise." Outside Meridian's headquarters, reporters had gathered, shouting questions as Miguel emerged. He walked past them with his head high, offering no comment as Victoria's security team escorted him to a waiting car. At home, he found Sophia packing for her MIT interview, her suitcase open on the living room floor. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "I'm taking a leave of absence until the investigation concludes," he replied, loosening his tie. Sophia dropped the sweater she was folding. "They suspended you? After everything you've done?" "I offered to step aside," Miguel clarified. "It was my decision." "But why?" "Nothing wrong. Sometimes, Mia, fighting isn't about confrontation. It's about maintaining your dignity while the truth emerges." He sat on the couch, suddenly exhausted. The board was concerned about market perception. I understood their position and made a choice that preserves both their interests and my integrity. Sophia sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm still going to me tomorrow," she said after a moment. "I won't let Davidson's lies affect my future." Miguel kissed the top of her head. "Good. Show them the brilliant Reyes women are made of." The next morning, as Miguel drove Sophia to the airport, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Reyes? This is Thomas Jenkins from Meridian's Night Security." "Thomas," Miguel greeted him warmly. "How are you?" "Concerned about you, man. These allegations are garbage." Thomas's voice was gruff with indignation. "Listen, I didn't want to say this in front of the FBI, but I might have something that could help you." Miguel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" "The night you found the money, I was doing my rounds earlier than usual. Management had asked for extra checks of the executive floor, that weak standard procedure when audits are happening." "Okay, single," quotes Miguel prompted, puzzled. "I saw Davidson in the hallway outside his office around 10:30 p.m. He was carrying a large duffel bag and looking nervous. When he saw me, he claimed he was taking home files to review. I logged it in my report." Miguel pulled over to the side of the road, his heart racing. "You saw him with a bag?" "Yes. And here's the thing. I saw you come up to that floor over an hour later, empty-handed except for your cleaning cart." There's no way you could have planted that money. Sophia was staring at her father, her eyes wide with hope. Thomas, have you told this to anyone? Miguel asked. I filed my regular security log that night, but no one's asked to review it. I'm calling because I just overheard that. Davidson's lawyers are requesting all security footage, but not the written logs. They're cherry-picking the evidence. Thomas, you need to call Agent Dawson immediately. This could be crucial. After getting Dawson's contact information and thanking Thomas profusely, Miguel turned to Sophia, a new light in his eyes. Did you hear that? Thomas saw Davidson with a bag that night, and he saw me arrive empty-handed later. Sophia threw her arms around her father's neck. This is it. This proves you couldn't have planted the money. At the airport, as Sophia prepared to board her flight to Boston, she hugged Miguel tightly. By the time I get back, this will all be cleared up, she said with fierce conviction. I hope so, Mia. Now go show MIT why they should accept the next great Reyes engineer. Returning home, Miguel found Victoria waiting outside his apartment building. She rolled down her car window as he approached. Get in, she said. We need to talk. Once inside her luxury sedan, Victoria turned to face him. Thomas Jenkins came forward with his security log, she said without preamble. The FBI is reviewing it now. Miguel nodded. He called me this morning. This could be the break we needed. Victoria's phone buzzed and she checked it briefly. The board wants to make a statement standing behind you. Now that there's corroborating evidence. Miguel raised an eyebrow. That was a quick change of heart. That's business, Victoria said with a shrug. The wind shifts. The sails adjust. And if Thomas hadn't come forward, if the wind was still blowing against him, Victoria met his gaze steadily. I would still be in your corner, Miguel. The board might have wavered, but I never did. For the first time, Miguel saw beyond Victoria's CEO persona to the woman beneath, someone who recognized value in people others overlooked, who fought for what she believed was right, even when it wasn't expedient. Why? He asked, echoing the question he'd posed when she first offered him the reward, and then again with the engineering position. Victoria was quiet for a moment. My father was a janitor, finally said. He cleaned office buildings in Chicago for 30 years. He was brilliant, self-taught in mathematics, read philosophy for pleasure, but without formal education or connection. Those offices were as close as he ever got to the corporate world. She looked out the window, her expression distant. He died still carrying other trash. I promised myself that if I ever had the power, I'd recognize the invisible people, the ones with talent and integrity that the system overlooks. Miguel sat back, understanding dawning. I'm not just me to you. I'm a symbol. Victoria turned back to him. You started as a symbol, Miguel. You've become much more than that. You're proof that my instincts were right, that merit exists at every level of an organization if leaders are willing to see it. His phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Agent Dawson. Reyes, I've reviewed Miss Kins's security log and cross-referenced it with building access records. His account checks out. Furthermore, we've located a gas station security camera that captured Davidson making a stop on his way home that night. The timestamp matches, and he's clearly carrying a large duffel bag consistent with Thomas's description. Miguel closed his eyes, relief washing over him. So the investigation is taking a very different direction, Dawson confirmed. Davidson's allegations against you appear to be fabricated. We'll need another statement from you, but things are looking much more favorable for your side of the story. When the call ended, Miguel relayed the news to Victoria, who immediately began typing on her phone. I'm telling the board to proceed with the statement supporting you, she explained. We need to get ahead of this shift in the narrative. Miguel nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere with Sophia, who would be landing in Boston soon for the interview that could shape her future. I need to call my daughter, he said, reaching for his phone. She should hear this from me before she faces the MIT committee. As Miguel dialed, Victoria touched his arm lightly. Your leave of absence is canceled, by the way. Jensen needs you back immediately. They're struggling without your expertise on the valve redesign. Miguel smiled, the tension of the past 24 hours finally easing from his shoulders. I'll be there tomorrow morning. The universe had balanced its accounts once more. The truth was emerging, as he'd believed it would, and Sophia was one step closer to the future he'd sacrificed everything to give her. When he reached her voicemail, he left a simple message. Mia, it's Papa. Good news. The truth is coming out. Davidson's lies are falling apart. Go into your interview with your head high. You are a Reyes, and Reyes stand tall even when others try to tear us down. I love you. The MIT campus stretched before Sophia, its historic brick buildings standing proudly against the clear blue October sky. She checked her phone one more time, replaying her father's voicemail for courage before slipping it back into her pocket. The truth was coming out. Davidson's lies were falling apart. She could walk into this interview without the cloud of suspicion hanging over her family name. Sophia Reyes, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tailored blazer, approached. I'm Dr. Harriet Watkins. We spoke on the phone. Sophia shook her hand firmly. Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Watkins. The pleasure is ours. Your application is quite impressive, Dr. Watkins gestured toward one of the brick buildings. The committee is ready when you are. As they walked, Dr. Watkins maintained a professional demeanor, but Sophia could sense her curiosity. Finally, the professor spoke. I imagine the past few weeks have been quite eventful for your family. Sophia nodded. They have, but my father taught me that characters revealed during challenges, not celebrations. Dr. Watkins smiled, a wise perspective. And speaking of your father, the allegations against him, I understand they're being resolved? Yes, Sophia replied, her chin lifting slightly. The FBI has found evidence supporting his account. The former CFO's claims were desperate fabrication. They reached a heavy wooden door, and Dr. Watkins paused with her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, Miss Reyes, the committee was impressed by your application long before we knew about your father's story. Your academic achievements and research proposals stand on their own merits. Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That means everything to me. Dr. Watkins, thank you. The interview room held 4 professors seated around a polished conference table. Their questions were precise, challenging, and focused entirely on Sophia's academic interests and research. Not once did they mention Miguel or the money. They discussed her proposed studies in sustainable engineering, her ideas about incorporating biomimicry into structural design, and her experience coding simulations for fluid dynamics. 2 hours later, Sophia emerged from the building, her mind buzzing with intellectual stimulation and cautious hope. She had answered well, engaged thoughtfully, and demonstrated her passion for engineering. Whether or not Mite accepted her, she had represented herself authentically. Ms. Reyes, a young student approached, clipboard in hand. I'm Carlos, your campus tour guide, Doctor. Watkins asked me to show you around. As they walked the grounds of MIT, Sophia felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. Carlos introduced her to several engineering students who shared her interests, showed her the laboratories where groundbreaking research was happening, and ended at the student center where a surprising figure waited. Ms. Reyes. Victoria Mercer rose from a bench, extending her hand. I hope you don't mind my interruption. I was in Boston for a conference and thought I'd congratulate you in person. Sophia shook Victoria's hand, bewildered. Thank you, Ms. Mercer, but congratulate me for what? Victoria smiled. For handling yourself with the same dignity your father showed? The news broke an hour ago. Davidson has formally retracted his allegations against your father and confessed to acting alone in the embezzlement. Carlos. The tour guide glanced between them with wide eyes, clearly recognizing Victoria and putting together who Sophia was. Wait, you're the janitor's daughter? The one from the news? Sophia nodded and Carlos broke into a grin. That's awesome. Your dad's story is all over campus. My ethics professor used it as a case study yesterday. As Carlos excused himself, Sophia turned back to Victoria. Davidson confessed completely. The FBI confronted him with the security evidence and his story crumbled. Victoria gestured to a nearby bench. Do you have a few minutes to talk? They sat together, an unlikely pair, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and the teenage daughter of a former janitor watching students hurry across the campus grounds. I wanted to speak with you directly, Victoria began, because your father isn't the only one whose integrity impressed me. Your application to MIA didn't mention your father's story or try to leverage the publicity. Sophia shrugged. That was his moment, not mine. I want to earn my place. Victoria nodded approvingly. Exactly the answer I expect. She reached into her bag and withdrew an envelope. Meridian Financial has established a new scholarship program for engineering students focusing on sustainability. The board unanimously selected you as our first recipient. Sophia stared at the envelope. I haven't even been accepted to MIT yet. The scholarship isn't tied to MIT specific. It's for whichever engineering program accepts you. Though after meeting you, I'd be surprised if MIT. Victoria handed her the envelope. Full tuition, housing, and a stipend for 4 years. No strings attached. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the envelope. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Your father's actions inspired this program, but your achievements earned you the scholarship. Victoria stood. My car is waiting. I have a flight back to catch. Thank you, Sophia said, rising as well. Not just for this, but for believing in my father when others doubted him. Victoria's professional demeanor softened. Your father sees value in people that others miss. I try to do the same. She extended her hand once more. I look forward to your future contributions to engineering, Ms. Reyes. As Victoria walked away, Sophia opened the envelope. Inside was not only the scholarship information, but a handwritten note. Your father restored my faith and integrity. Your brilliance gives me hope for the future. Both are priceless gifts. Being back in the city, Miguel returned to Jensen Manufacturing with little fanfare. His team greeted him warmly and work resumed on the hydraulic valve redesign as if he'd never left. The media coverage of Davidson's confession and retraction had shifted public opinion firmly back in Miguel's favor, but he found the continued attention uncomfortable. The prototype is performing exactly as your simulations predicted, the Jensen team lead reported during their afternoon meeting. The temperature compensation is perfect. We're ready to implement this across all models. Miguel nodded, reviewing the test data. Let's do one more thermal stress test at maximum load before we commit to full production. As they discussed technical details, Miguel's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Interview went great. Met VM here. Big news to share when I get home. Love you, Papa. A smile crossed his face briefly before he returned to the meeting. Whatever news Sophia had, he knew it would be positive. The universe seemed to be realigning in their favor. That evening, Miguel waited at the airport for Sophia's return flight. As passengers streamed through the arrival gate, he spotted her immediately, her face glowing with excitement as she ran toward him. him. Papa, she threw her arms around him. The interview was amazing, and look, she thrust the scholarship envelope into his hands. Meridian is giving me a full scholarship for engineering. Victoria Mercer came to MIT to tell me in person. Miguel opened the envelope, stunned by the generous terms of the scholarship. This is incredible, Mija. And that's not all, Sophia continued as they walked toward the parking garage. Dr. Watkins strongly hinted that my acceptance is likely. She said they'll make decisions earlier than usual this year. Miguel wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I'm so proud of you, Sophia. This is everything we've worked for. No, Papa, she corrected him gently. This is everything you've sacrificed for. As they drove home, Sophia recounted every detail of her interview and campus tour. Miguel listened, his heart full. The road ahead now seemed clear and bright. Sophia at MIT. Himself back in engineering, their financial struggles significantly eased. What about you? Sophia asked eventually. How does it feel to be vindicated? Miguel considered the question. Vindication isn't what matters to me. What matters is that the truth prevailed, and that you can hold your head high as a Reyes. Everyone at McKay was talking about you, Sophia said. Carlos, my tour guide, said his ethics professor used your story as a case study. Miguel shook his head, still uncomfortable with the attention. I hope they focused on the right lesson. It wasn't about heroism. It was about doing what's right even when it's difficult. That's exactly why people are inspired, Papa. In a world where cutting corners and looking out for yourself seem normal, you showed that integrity still matters. At home. As Sophia unpacked her overnight bag, Miguel checked his email and found a message from Victoria. Board approved the full hydraulic system upgrade for all Meridian Vault facilities based on your prototype results. Budget is $12 million over 2 years. You'll have complete project oversight. Call me tomorrow to discuss. Another message, this one from Thomas Jenkins, contained a single line, "Justice prevails. Drinks soon to celebrate?" A third email came from Eliza Chun. Exclusive interview opportunity. Your engineering journey from Columbia to Jensen Manufacturing. Your choice of venue and timing. No questions about Davidson or the money unless you want to address it. The final message was from Agent Dawson. Davidson's full confession attached for your records. FBI has closed the investigation. You are fully cleared of all accusations. Thanks for your cooperation during a difficult situation. Miguel closed his laptop. A profound sense of closure washing over him. The money, the allegations, the media frenzy, all of it was fading into background noise. What remained was what had always mattered: his work, his daughter, his integrity. The next morning, he woke before sunrise, a habit from years of early janitorial shifts that hadn't faded despite his change in circumstances. He made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city slowly come to life. His phone rang. Victoria Mercer, calling unusually early. "I hope I didn't wake you," she said when he answered. "I've been up for hours," Miguel assured her. "Old habit. I understand completely. Listen, I'm calling because there's been another development. I wanted you to hear from me first." Miguel tensed slightly, conditioned now to expect complications. "What is it?" "The board has decided to create a new position, Chief Integrity Officer. The role would involve overseeing ethical standards across all Meridian subsidiaries, including Jensen." Victoria paused. "They want you for the position." Miguel nearly dropped his coffee mug. "Me? I'm an engineer, not an ethics professor." "You're both, Miguel. You've lived ethical principles that most people only talk about, and your engineering background gives you the analytical skills to develop practical systems for maintaining integrity in complex organizations." I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it," Victoria replied. "The position would be in addition to your engineering role at Jensen. We certainly don't want to lose your technical expertise, but your influence could extend much further." After promising to think about it, Miguel ended the call and sat in stunned silence. From janitor to engineer to ethics officer in less than a month, it seemed unreal. Like a dream he might wake from at any moment. And yet it wasn't the titles or salaries that gave him satisfaction. It was the knowledge that his actions, the simple choice to do the right thing, had created ripples, extending far beyond himself. A scholarship program that would help students like Sophia, a renewed emphasis on integrity at a major corporation, a chance to influence business ethics on a broader scale. He thought of Elena, what she would say if she could see him now. She'd always believed in him, even during their darkest moments in Colombia. Even when they had arrived in America with nothing but hope and determination. "We did it, mi amor," he whispered to her memory. "We gave Sophia the future you dreamed for her." Outside, the sun broke fully over the horizon, bathing the city in golden light. A new day. A new chapter. 3 months passed, transforming Miguel and Sophia's lives in ways neither could have imagined. That fateful night when he had discovered the money, winter settled over the city, dusting the streets with snow and painting the windows with delicate patterns of frost. Inside their new apartment, a modest but comfortable two-bed, in a safer neighborhood closer to Sophia's school, father and daughter decorated their first Christmas tree together in years. "Look what I found," Sophia said, carefully unwrapping a small clay angel from tissue paper. "Remember this? I made it in 3rd grade." Miguel took the slightly lopsided angel. Its paint faded, but still recognizable. "Of course I remember. Your mother put this at the top of our tree instead of a star. She said it was more meaningful than anything we could buy." Sophia's voice held the bittersweet tone that always accompanied memories of Elena. "I think she'd be happy with our tree this year. Miguel nodded, surveying their modest decorations. It wasn't extravagant. They had both agreed to be prudent with their newfound financial stability, but it was festive and warm in a way their previous Christmases hadn't been. The scholarship money and Miguel's significantly improved salary had eased their most pressing concerns, but years of careful frugality had ingrained habits that wouldn't quickly fade. She would be most happy about this, Miguel said, picking up the envelope that held Sophia's MIT acceptance letter, which had arrived the previous week, earlier than expected. The thick package had contained not just admission to the prestigious engineering program, but also an invitation to join an elite research group focused on sustainable infrastructure design. Sophia beamed, unable to contain her pride even after days of celebration. I still can't believe it sometimes. I can, Miguel said firmly. You earned this, Mia. Every bit of it. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Board meeting just ended. They unanimously approved your integrity initiative proposal. Congratulations. Miguel showed the message to Sophia, who squeezed his arm excitedly. That's huge, Papa. Your first major program as Chief Integrity Officer. The dual role, maintaining his engineering position at Jensen while developing new ethical standards for Meridian, had proven challenging but deeply satisfying. After much consideration, Miguel had accepted Victoria's offer, recognizing the unique opportunity to influence corporate culture from the inside. His first major proposal had been ambitious, a company-wide integrity audit that would evaluate Meridian's practices from top to bottom, identify vulnerabilities that could enable another Davidson-type situation, and implement transparent accountability measures at every level. We should celebrate, Sophia declared. Let's actually use those fancy restaurants gift cards Thomas gave you, Miguel chuckled, remembering the security guard's insistence on treating them to dinner after his security log had helped clear Miguel's name. Thomas had since become a friend, joining them occasionally for coffee or a meal. Dinner out sounds perfect, Miguel agreed, but first I need to finish this. He gestured to his laptop where he'd been working on the framework for implementing the integrity initiative across Meridian's various subsidiaries. While Sophia returned to decorating, Miguel completed his work, still marveling at how natural it felt to be drafting corporate policies instead of cleaning corporate offices. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Some executives still treated him with subtle condescension, and he sometimes caught himself using deferential language out of old habit, but his confidence grew daily. Victoria had been instrumental in that growth, positioning him as her equal in meeting, publicly acknowledging his expertise, and fiercely defending his right to reshape Meridian's ethical practices. Their professional relationship had developed into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. His phone rang, and Lisa Chun, the journalist whose thoughtful coverage had helped shape public perception of his story. Miguel, she greeted him warmly. How are you? Well, thank you. And yourself? Busy as always. I'm calling because I'm working on a follow-up piece. 3 months later, how the Meridian money discovery changed corporate America. Miguel raised an eyebrow. Isn't that rather grandiose? I'm just one person who did what anyone should do, Eliza chuckled. That's exactly why your story resonates. But it's not just about you anymore. Did you know that 5 other major corporations have created Chief Integrity Officer positions since Meridian announced yours? Or that Stanford Business School is developing a case study about Meridian's response to the embezzlement scandal? Miguel hadn't known either of those things, and the knowledge left him momentarily speechless. Your story tapped into something people were hungry for, Eliza continued. In an era of corporate scandals and cynicism, you reminded everyone that integrity isn't just a buzzword on a mission statement. It's a practical choice, made by real people every day. After arranging an interview for the following week, Miguel hung up and sat quietly, processing Eliza's word. His simple decision returning money that wasn't his had created ripples far beyond anything he could have anticipated. That evening, as they entered the upscale restaurant Thomas had selected, Miguel felt a momentary discomfort. Just months ago, he would have been invisible to the clientele here, just another service worker in the background of their privileged lives. Now, the Mater D greeted him by name, having recognized him from the news coverage. Mr. Reyes, we're honored to have you dining with us tonight. Miss Mercer called ahead to ensure you have our best table. Sophia shot her father a questioning look as they were led to a window table with a spectacular view of the city skyline. I didn't know Victoria was joining us, Miguel said to the Mater D, equally surprised. Oh, Ms. Mercer isn't coming. She simply wanted to ensure you received VIP treatment. The man handed them leather-bound menus with a flourish. Your dinner is also taken care of this evening, Miss Mercer's instructions. When the Mater D departed, Sophia leaned forward. Okay, what's going on between you and Miss Mercer? That's not just a boss being nice. Miguel felt a flush creep up his neck. We're colleagues and friends. She's been very supportive of my transition. Sophia's skeptical expression made it clear she wasn't convinced. Papa, she's taken a personal interest in both of us that goes beyond professional courtesy. The scholarship, the job, and now this. She likes you, Sophia, Miguel admonished gently. Victoria Mercer is a powerful CEO. I'm her ethics officer who used to clean her office. It's not like that, Sophia hummed, unconvinced. And what about dinner last week, and the coffee meetings, and the texts at all hours? Miguel opened his menu, hoping to change the subject. The business world operates at all hours. Now what looks good to you? Sophia allowed the diversion, but her knowing smile remained as they ordered and enjoyed their meal. The truth was, Miguel had been wondering the same thing about Victoria's attentions. Their professional relationship had undeniably developed a personal dimension, with conversations that often strayed from business to books, music, family histories, and philosophical discussions about purpose and meaning. Just last week, after a late strategic planning session, they'd shared a quiet dinner where Victoria had spoken about her father, the janitor whose brilliance had gone unrecognized, with a vulnerability that surprised him. She'd asked about Elena too, listening intently as Miguel described his late wife's gentle strength and unwavering optimism. But Miguel had cautioned himself against reading too much into these interactions. Victoria was, after all, one of the most powerful women in the financial sector, and he was still adjusting to his new position. The power imbalance made any deeper connection complicated at best, inappropriate at worst. After dinner, as they walked through the light snowfall back to their car, Sophia looped her arm through his. "Thank you, Papa, for everything. For dinner? You should thank Tomasande, apparently, Victoria." Sophia shook her head. "Not just for dinner, for showing me what integrity looks like in action, for sacrificing everything to give me opportunities, for never compromising who you are, even when life was at its hardest." Miguel squeezed her arm, too moved to speak immediately. When he found his voice, it was thick with emotion. "You have always been my purpose, Sophia. Everything I did was to give you a chance at the future you deserved, and now we both have futures we never imagined," she replied softly. The next morning, Miguel arrived early at Meridian for the first official meeting of the Integrity Initiative Task Force. The conference room gradually filled with department heads, compliance officers, and key personnel from various Meridian subsidiaries, including Jensen Manufacturing. As Miguel prepared to begin, Victoria slipped into the room, choosing a seat near the back rather than her usual place at the head of the table. Her presence wasn't required at this operational meeting, and her choice to attend while ceding the floor entirely to Miguel was a powerful statement about her confidence in his leadership. "Good morning," Miguel began, his slight accent more pronounced when he was nervous, but his voice steady. "Thank you all for being here. The purpose of this task force is to implement a comprehensive integrity framework across all Meridian operations." He moved to the presentation screen, clicking to the first slide. "But before we discuss mechanisms and policies, I want to address the foundation of our work. Integrity is not about rules or enforcement. It's about culture. It's about creating an environment where doing the right thing is the expectation, not the exception." As he spoke, Miguel noticed heads nodding, expressions engaged. These executives and managers weren't simply humoring him. They were genuinely listening. "3 months ago, I found money in the trash and returned it. This shouldn't be remarkable. It shouldn't be newsworthy. It should be the baseline expectation for human behavior." He paused, making eye contact around the room. "The fact that my story went viral reveals something troubling about our collective expectations. We've normalized ethical compromises to the point where basic integrity seems heroic." From her seat in the back, Victoria watched with quiet pride as Miguel commanded the room. The man who had once emptied her trash now held the rapt attention of Meridian's leadership team. His journey was exceptional, not because he had risen from janitor to executive, though that was certainly remarkable, but because he had maintained his essential self through that transformation. The meeting proceeded with a detailed discussion of the initiative's implementation. Miguel had thoroughly prepared, anticipating questions and concerns with thoughtful, practical responses. By the session's end, even the most skeptical executives were on board with his vision. As the room cleared, Victoria approached him. "That was impressive," she said, her professional demeanor softening into genuine admiration. "You've won over some of our toughest critics." Miguel began gathering his materials. "The proposal is sound. They recognize its value to the company. It's more than that," Victoria countered. "They recognize your value, your authenticity." She hesitated, then added, "I was wondering if you'd be free for dinner tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Miguel looked up, momentarily caught off guard. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she assured him. "It's actually about an opportunity I think you should consider. The World Economic Forum is hosting a special session on corporate ethics next month, and they've requested a speaker from Meridian to discuss our integrity initiatives." Miguel raised his eyebrows. "And you think I should go?" "I know you should go," Victoria said firmly. "Your story and your perspective need a global audience. The impact you could have extends far beyond Meridian." As Miguel considered the invitation, he realized how dramatically his horizon had expanded. From the confined world of night shifts and tight budgets, he now found himself considering influencing global corporate ethics. The path that had opened before him seemed limitless, stretching toward possibilities he had never dared imagine. "I'll think about it," he promised, though they both knew he would accept the challenge. It was, after all, an opportunity to extend the ripples of integrity even further, to transform a simple act of honesty into a movement that might reshape how businesses approached ethics. As Victoria left, Miguel stood alone in the conference room, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months. From trash collector to truth teller, from invisible worker to ethical exemplar. The roles had changed dramatically, but the man at the core remained the same, still guided by the simple principle that had led him to return a bag of money when no one was watching. The World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland was a world away from Miguel's former life. As he stood at the window of his luxury hotel suite, watching snowflakes drift onto the pristine alpine landscape, he couldn't help but marvel at the path that had led him here. 4 months ago, he had been mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Now he was preparing to address global leaders about corporate ethics and integrity. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Crush it today, Papa. MIT friends say the whole engineering department is streaming your talk. No pressure." Miguel smiled. Sophia had settled into MIT's early acceptance program with remarkable ease, quickly establishing herself as a rising star in the engineering department. Her professors already spoke of her potential for groundbreaking work in sustainable infrastructure design. Another text arrived, this one from Victoria. "Car waiting downstairs at 9 a.m. Don't forget to wear the blue tie. It matches your eyes and complements the stage lighting." The personal note made Miguel's heart beat a little faster. Since their dinner the night before he accepted the Davos invitation, something had shifted in their relationship. The professional boundary remained intact. Both were too principled to blur those lines while working directly together, but there was an undeniable warmth in their interactions, a sense of possibilities simmering beneath the surface. As Miguel adjusted the blue tie Victoria had suggested, his mind drifted to that pivotal dinner. They had discussed the Davos opportunity, yes, but the conversation had eventually wandered to personal territory. "Do you ever think about how differently our paths might have intersected?" Victoria had asked, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" "If you had never immigrated, if you had remained an engineer in Colombia, if I had met you as a peer at an international conference instead of finding you cleaning my office." Miguel had considered the question carefully. Perhaps we would have been colleagues sooner, but would we have truly seen each other? Or would we have been too busy performing our professional roles? Victoria's gaze had been penetrating. "You think our current dynamic former janitor and CEO allows us to see each other more authentically?" "I think adversity strips away pretense," Miguel had replied. "You saw me when I was invisible to others, and I saw your character when you defended me without hesitation." The memory warmed him as he gathered his notes and headed downstairs to meet the waiting car. Today's address felt monumental, not just for his career but for the message itself. He had spent weeks crafting his speech, determined to transcend his personal story and speak to universal principles of integrity and accountability. The forum's grand hall was packed with financial leaders, corporate executives, and policymakers from around the world. As Miguel was led backstage, he spotted familiar faces from international news CEOs whose companies controlled trillions in assets, political figures whose decisions shaped global markets. "M.R. Reyes," a forum coordinator, approached. "She'll be on in 5 minutes. Ems." Mercer's already seated in the front row. Miguel nodded, taking a deep breath to calm his nerves. Public speaking had never been his forte, but passion for his message overrode his natural reticence. When the moderator introduced him as the janitor who found $1 million and changed corporate America, Miguel walked onto the stage with quiet confidence. The applause was polite but curious, many in attendance still wondering why this unlikely figure had been given such a prominent platform. He spotted Victoria immediately, her presence in the front row a reassuring anchor. She gave him a subtle nod, and he began. "Good morning. My name is Miguel Reyes. 4 months ago, I was a night janitor at Meridian Financial. Today, I am their Chief Integrity Officer. Many have called my journey remarkable, but I am here to tell you that it shouldn't be." The room fell silent, the audience leaning forward slightly. The fact that a janitor returning found money is considered extraordinary reveals a troubling assumption that integrity is the exception, not the rule. That those in service positions are not expected to demonstrate the same ethical standards we demand of executives. Miguel paused, looking directly at the assembled leaders. But the truth is simpler and more challenging. Integrity is not a luxury afforded by privilege. It is a choice available to everyone, regardless of title or salary. What should be remarkable is not that I returned the money, but that we live in a world where such an action is considered newsworthy. As Miguel continued his address, weaving together his personal experience with broader observations about corporate culture, he could feel the audience's engagement deepening. These weren't just polite listeners anymore. They were people genuinely grappling with his message. The most powerful question any organization can ask is not, how do we prevent unethical behavior, but rather, how do we create a culture where ethical behavior is the natural choice? Miguel leaned forward, his voice gaining intensity. This is not about compliance systems or penalties. It's about seeing and valuing every person in your organization, from the CEO to the cleaning staff, from her seat in the front row. Victoria watched Miguel command the stage with a presence that belied his lack of public speaking experience. This wasn't the nervous engineer who had first presented to Meridian's board. This was a man fully inhabiting his purpose, speaking truth to power without flinching. "In conclusion," Miguel said, his voice now gentle but firm, "integrity isn't a policy. It's a practice. It's what we choose when no one is watching, when there's no reward or recognition. It's returning money that isn't yours, even when your daughter needs tuition. It's treating the janitor with the same respect as the board chairman. It's remembering that the most valuable currency in business isn't money, it's trust. The silence following his final words lasted only a moment before the audience rose in a standing ovation. Victoria was the first on her feet, her expression a mixture of pride and something deeper, more personal. The moderator returned to the stage, clearly moved. Thank you, Mr. Reyes, for that powerful perspective. We have time for a few questions from the audience. Hands shot up throughout the hall. Miguel fielded questions about Meridian's new integrity framework, his thoughts on regulatory approaches, and how his engineering background informed his ethics work. Each answer was thoughtful, nuanced, and authentic. The final question came from a young woman representing a global business publication. Mr. Reyes, your story has inspired millions, but critics suggest it perpetuates a magical immigrant narrative that lets corporations off the hook for systemic issues. How do you respond to concerns that your individual story might distract from needed structural changes? A ripple of tension moved through the audience. Victoria straightened in her seat, watching carefully. This was the kind of challenging question that could derail an inexperienced speaker. Miguel nodded slowly, appreciating the question's complexity. It's a valid concern. Individual stories can become convenient narratives that distract from systemic problems, but they can also be catalysts for those very structural changes. He gestured to the audience. Meridian has not simply celebrated my story, they've used it to implement concrete reforms. Every employee now has direct channels to report ethical concerns. Executive compensation is now partially tied to integrity. Whistleblower protections have been strengthened. His expression grew more serious. As for the magical immigrant narrative, there was nothing magical about my journey. I cleaned floors for 7 years. I worked night shifts while raising my daughter alone. My engineering expertise was ignored until a crisis made it valuable. My story should not inspire feel-good complacency. It should provoke uncomfortable questions about why such talent goes unrecognized in the first place. The questioner nodded, clearly satisfied with his thoughtful response. When the session ended, Miguel was immediately surrounded by forum participants eager to continue the conversation. CEOs pressed business cards into his hands, university presidents invited him to speak at their institutions, and policymakers requested his input on regulatory framework. Through it all, Miguel maintained his characteristic humility, engaging earnestly but never forgetting that 4 months earlier, these same people would likely have walked past him without a glance. It was nearly an hour before he made his way back to Victoria, who waited patiently at the edge of the crowd. "You were magnificent," she said when they finally had a moment alone. "Every person in that room was hanging on your words." Miguel exhaled, the tension of the performance finally leaving his shoulders. "I was terrified, but the message matters more than my comfort." Victoria smiled. "That's precisely why you were so effective. Your authenticity is your power." She glanced at her watch. "Our flight isn't until tomorrow morning. Would you like to join me for dinner? There's a small local restaurant in the village that the tourists don't know about." "I'd like that very much," Miguel replied. The restaurant was indeed far from the forum's glitz. Family-owned establishment tucked away on a narrow cobblestone street. The owner greeted Victoria by name, evidence of her previous visits to Davos, and led them to a quiet corner table lit by candles. Over traditional Swiss cuisine, their conversation flowed easily from the day's events to broader reflections on life's unexpected turns. "I have a confession to make," Victoria said as they finished their meal. "When I first offered you the engineering position, it wasn't entirely altruistic. I genuinely believed in your abilities, yes, but I also saw a powerful PR opportunity for Meridian." Miguel nodded, unsurprised. "I suspected as much. You're a brilliant businesswoman. What I didn't anticipate," she continued, "was how much you would transform Meridian from within. The Integrity Initiative isn't just good PR. It's making us a better company." Miguel studied her in the candlelight. "And what about you, Victoria? Has any of this changed you?" She met his gaze directly. "Profoundly. You've reminded me why I wanted to be a leader in the first place, not just to succeed, but to create something meaningful." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "Sophia thinks you like me," Miguel said finally, a hint of amusement in his voice. "As more than a colleague." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Sophia is remarkably perceptive." She leaned forward slightly. "The question is, what do you think, Miguel?" "I think," he replied carefully, "that we have a complex professional relationship that requires clear boundaries." "That's the pragmatic engineer speaking," Victoria observed. "But what does Miguel the man think?" Miguel considered her question, aware of the precipice they stood upon. His life had been transformed in so many ways already. Was he ready for one more profound change? "Miguel the man," he said softly, "thinks that some connections transcend conventional circumstances, that perhaps the universe has a peculiar sense of humor, bringing together a CEO and a janitor through a bag of discarded money." Victoria's smile was warm and genuine. The universe does seem to have a flair for the dramatic. As they walked back through the snowy village streets toward their hotel, Victoria's hand found his. The gesture was simple but significant, the first explicit acknowledgement of the personal dimension of their relationship. Tomorrow they would return to Meridian, to professional roles and corporate responsibilities, but tonight in a quiet alpine village thousands of miles from where their paths first crossed, They were simply Victoria and Miguel, two people discovering that integrity could lead to unexpected rewards far more valuable than a bag of money found in the trash. Spring arrived in a gentle cascade of renewal. The city's parks bloomed with fresh colors, winter's grip finally releasing into memory. For Miguel, the changing season mirrored the ongoing transformation of his life, each day bringing new growth, unexpected challenges, and deepening relationships. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when he discovered the money in Davidson's trash. 6 months that had altered the trajectory of his life so completely that sometimes, in quiet moments, he still struggled to reconcile his present with his past. "You're distracted today," Victoria observed as they walked through Central Park on a Sunday afternoon. Their professional relationship had gradually, cautiously evolved into something more personal: weekend walks, quiet dinners, conversations that had nothing to do with Meridian or integrity initiatives. "Just reflecting," Miguel replied, watching a family fly a kite in the distance. "Sophia called this morning. Her research project was selected for the Summer Engineering Symposium." Victoria smiled. "That's wonderful. She's thriving at MIT." "She is, but she said something that struck me." Miguel paused, organizing his thoughts. "She told me that a professor introduced her as Miguel Reyes's daughter, and for the first time in her life she was proud of that association instead of worried it might trigger prejudice or assumptions." Victoria took his hand, a gesture that still felt new but increasingly natural. "Your story has changed how people perceive the name Reyes. That's what troubles me," Miguel admitted. "My story. It's become this narrative that exists independently of me, the honest janitor who found $1 million. People reference it in contexts I never imagined." Since his Davos address, Miguel's influence had expanded exponentially. His speech had been viewed millions of times online. Business schools incorporated his story into ethics curricula. Religious leaders cited him in sermons about modern morality. Politicians on both sides of the aisle invoked his example to support various policies. "You've become a symbol," Victoria acknowledged. "That's the burden of accidental public figures. People project their own meanings onto your experience." They found a bench overlooking the lake and sat together, watching rowboats glide across the water's surface. "Last week," Miguel continued, "I received an email from a night janitor in Singapore. He said my story inspired him to report corruption he'd witnessed at the financial firm where he works. He's now facing retaliation and possible deportation." Victoria turned to him, concerned. "What did you do?" "I connected him with our legal team and arranged for Meridian's Singapore office to provide support." Miguel sighed. "But it made me realize the responsibility that comes with being a symbol. People are making life-altering decisions based on my example without the safety net I had in you and Meridian." Victoria considered this. "Perhaps that's the next evolution of your work, creating systems to protect others who choose integrity when the stakes are high." The idea resonated with Miguel. His integrity initiative at Meridian had been successful, but its impact was limited to one corporation. What about the countless workers in companies without such protections? The janitors, security guards, and service staff who witnessed ethical breaches but lacked the power to speak up safely? "I've been thinking about starting a foundation," he said, the concept crystallizing as he spoke. "Something independent from Meridian that could provide legal support, financial assistance, and advocacy for whistleblowers and ethics advocates, especially those in vulnerable positions." Victoria's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant, Miguel. It expands your impact exponentially while addressing a real need. It would require significant funding, connections to legal resources worldwide, media relationships, single quotes." Miguel trailed off, the scale of the vision suddenly daunting. "All things I can help with," Victoria pointed out. "My network extends far beyond Meridian, and I suspect many of those business leaders who were so impressed in Davos would be eager to support such an initiative." Miguel studied her face, still sometimes amazed by the unexpected ally he'd found in her. "Why do you believe in me so consistently? From that first night to now, you've never wavered." Victoria was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I was 12, my father came home from his janitorial shift at 2 a.m., bleeding from his hand. He'd found a broken window at the office building he cleaned, clearly a break-in attempt. Instead of ignoring it, he cleaned up the glass with his bare hands to protect the morning staff, then reported it to security." She looked out over the lake, remembering. His supervisor accused him of breaking the window himself, despite 15 years of perfect service. Despite the security footage showing him arriving hours after the glass was broken, they fired him. No severance, no reference, nothing. Miguel listened, understanding now the personal dimension of her commitment to recognizing overlooked workers. "That's when I decided I would become the kind of leader who saw people for their character, not their position," Victoria continued. "When you called me that night about the money, it wasn't just about the embezzlement. It was about finally being in a position to ensure that someone like my father received justice instead of punishment for doing the right thing." The revelation deepened Miguel's understanding of their connection. What he had interpreted as extraordinary recognition was, for Victoria, the fulfillment of a childhood vow. "I think we were meant to cross paths." he said softly. Your father's experience, Elena's death, leaving me a single father, Sophia's brilliance needing opportunity, my engineering background going unused, Davidson's crime, all these threads wove together to create this moment. Victoria's hand tightened around his. I don't usually believe in fate, but it's hard to see another explanation. As they continued their walk, the conversation shifted to practical matters, how to structure the foundation, potential board members, funding sources. By the time they reached the park's exit, the concept had evolved from a nebulous idea to a concrete plan. We should bring Sophia into this discussion, Victoria suggested as they hailed a taxi. Her perspective would be valuable, especially regarding how to reach younger generations. She's coming home next weekend for spring break, Miguel replied. We could have dinner together, the three of us. The proposal hung in the air, significant in its domestic implication. It would be their first social gathering as something resembling a family unit. I'd like that very much, Victoria said warmly. The following Friday, Miguel prepared dinner in his apartment with nervous precision. The simple two-bedroom felt modest compared to Victoria's penthouse, but she had insisted she preferred its homey atmosphere to restaurant formality. Sophia arrived first, dropping her backpack by the door and embracing her father with the exuberance of a young adult thriving in her independence, but still glad to be home. The place looks great, Papa, she said, noticing the fresh flowers. The new artwork on the walls, subtle upgrades that reflected their improved circumstances while maintaining the home's essential character. Victoria is joining us for dinner, Miguel explained, returning to his preparation of paella, Elena's recipe, a piece of their Colombian heritage preserved through years of adaptation to American life. Sophia's eyes widened with interest. Oh, is this the first official Meet the Daughter dinner? Miguel gave her a warning look. It's a discussion about a foundation I'm considering starting. Your input would be valuable. Sophia hummed skeptically, helping herself to a piece of bell pepper from the cutting board. And the candles and wine are for the foundation discussion too? Before Miguel could respond, there was a gentle knock at the door. Sophia winked at her father and went to answer it. Ms. Mercer, she greeted Victoria warmly. Or should I call you Victoria now that you're dating my father? Sophia, Miguel admonished from the kitchen, mortified. But Victoria laughed, genuinely amused by Sophia's directness. Victoria is perfect, she replied, handing Sophia a small gift bag. I brought you something from MIT's archives. The engineering department curator owed me a favor. Sophia opened the bag and gasped, pulling out a first edition book on hydraulic engineering, signed by the pioneering female author. This is incredible. Thank you. The initial awkwardness dissolved as they settled into dinner. The conversation flowed easily between MIT updates, Meridian developments, and eventually Miguel's foundation concept. Sophia listened intently, asking insightful questions that reflected her growing sophistication. So it would be like a legal defense fund, but specifically for ethical whistleblowers, she clarified. That's part of it, Miguel explained, but also preventative education, corporate consulting on building ethical cultures, policy advocacy for stronger protections, and direct support for individuals who face retaliation. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. You should incorporate a tech element, an anonymous reporting platform that connects whistleblowers directly to resources. Most younger workers would look online first before seeking institutional help. Victoria made a note on her phone. Excellent point. We could develop an app that provides both guidance and connections to support. We? Sophia asked, her expression innocent but her eyes knowing. Miguel and Victoria exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. I've offered to help your father establish the foundation, Victoria explained diplomatically. My network and experience with nonprofits could be useful, Sophia smiled, saying nothing but clearly perceiving the deeper connection developing between them. As the evening progressed, Miguel observed the easy rapport between the two women in his life. Sophia's initial protective skepticism had given way to genuine engagement with Victoria, whose interest in Sophia's studies and aspirations was clearly sincere. They discovered shared passions for sustainable technology and women's advancement in STEM fields, launching into a spirited discussion about biomimetic engineering approaches. After dinner, as they enjoyed coffee and the traditional Colombian dessert Miguel had prepared, Sophia brought the conversation back to the foundation. You should name it after Mama, she said quietly. The Elena Reyes Foundation for Ethical Leadership. Miguel felt his chest tighten with emotion. Sophia ... single quotes. She would have been so proud of all this, Papa. Of what you've accomplished, of how you've turned one moment of integrity into something that will help others. Her name deserves to be part of that legacy. Victoria watched the exchange with respectful silence, understanding the sacred territory of family memory they were navigating. I think it's a beautiful idea, she said gently. If you're comfortable with it, Miguel. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She would have liked you, Victoria, he said finally. Elena believed in seeing the potential in people just as you do.